It's actually 4 days to go till the first South Africans get to vote from the 17th of May. South Africans registered in the Middle East, North African countries, they will actually be the first South Africans to vote in the 2024 elections. Then on the 18th and the 29th, South Africans registered at 102 foreign missions will then get a chance to vote. 16 days till the 29th of May, but already many have registered for special votes starting already on the 27th of April. I do not know who I am going to vote for just yet. I am expecting to step into a ballot booth and be somewhat instilled with a Holy Spirit that will help me decide. But I really want elections to be tomorrow already. I'm already fatigued by an election campaign period. What's likely going to happen is there's going to be 14 days after a national and provincial election where political parties are going to have to together and decide how to constitute what is most the likely scenario, and that is coalition government. And coalition, what a Freudian slip there. Coalition government. And after that, governing is supposed to start after the swearing in of MPs and then the inauguration of a premier. But I don't seem to be the only one who seems to be still undecided. Let's go to a quick voice note.
Morning, Lester, and your team. Flores, Worcester. Lester, you just said it's a little bit over 2 weeks to go before our general elections. And let me tell you, I'm still undecided on who I want to vote. The manifestos of the parties that I'm interested in are so close. But also as a person of color, I know that my vote is well sought after, especially in the Western Cape. So I really need to make a wise decision. The problem is with politicians, they are like tortoises. They come out only this time of the year and then they go into hibernation for 5 years and they nowhere to be found. So yeah, I'm still in the middle. I really don't know who to vote for. But maybe come 29th, I will be able to make up my mind. Have a good show. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, Flores. So let's be joined now by Michael Beaumont, National Chairperson of Action. Michael, we were speaking about this off air. So many undecided South Africans. As a political party, does that excite you? Does that worry you? Does that leave you with difficulty in how you're polling, how you're attracting, how you're directing resources as a political party trying to attract votes in this year's election?
Yeah, thanks. I think it's an interesting situation, and it's a situation that is a product of how South Africans have been failed by a political establishment for such a long period of time. I think the reality is, over time, many South Africans have moved into the I don't vote column anymore, which is an astonishing consideration when you think about the challenges that should get people to go and vote. And I don't believe it's that South Africans are apathetic. I think that they feel let down. And they're looking at a party in government that has let them down for 30 years. And they're looking at parties in opposition that have failed to have any ambition to be anything more than an opposition. And I think that's why, as a new political party, the prospects for us are incredibly strong. The majority of South Africans, we believe, are undecided at this time. We've been very critical of the polling in South Africa, not just because so much of it is so conflicted, but also because, quite frankly, it's a very unpredictable environment right now. South Africans are making their minds up, and I'm still of the view that a lot of people, just like you were mentioning now, are going to make their mind up at the gate of the voting station.
You've continuously expressed that you're campaigning to be in government. You're campaigning to be the majority party in South Africa. You've also cut out any chance of coalition government with the ANC. You are part of the multi-party charter. Currently, just in terms of the realistic prospects of ActionSA, where are you currently internally polling? And that's maybe something that you may want to share, maybe something that you want to keep as a party secret. But in terms of your predictions of where you find ActionSA after the 29th of May.
Well, I think the bottom line is ActionSA is going to emerge as a major political force in South Africa. When you consider in 2021, ActionSA contested only 6 municipalities out of 278, and despite that became the 6th largest party in South Africa. We are now on the ballot in all 9 provinces and for every South African. And what we achieved in that election is going to be important for this one, because we united people from diverse communities. We got 22% of the vote across Soweto and 21% of the vote across Sandton. No party has achieved that kind of grassroots level of diversity. And from our point of view, that is an important feature for the way that we have grown across the geography of South Africa. Certainly, we know that we're going to be stronger in some provinces more than others, and the work of growing a political party is not going to simply finish now. It's a long journey that we're embarking upon. But more and more South Africans are seeing ActionSA as the alternative to the failed establishment and as a tested new political party. I think a lot of the new political parties South Africans are right to feel concerned about, because they have been led to believe and let down before. And I think the fact that ActionSA has come through an election somewhat successfully in that regard, stands us above the others, including a track record in government with Herman Mashaba's tenure as mayor of Johannesburg, Athol Trollope's in Nelson Mandela Bay. This is a party that actually understands government and understands what needs to be done to fix the country.
Isn't the trouble by calling out a failed political establishment is that you are run by established political party representatives, including Athol Trollop, yourself in the eThekwini Metro. You're an experienced politician, so the trouble with calling out a failed establishment is that you have been part of the establishment, and by getting into close proximity that you hope to, if elected, you then become the establishment.
Well, actually, I think we must be clear. We have left political parties from all kinds of parties to form ActionSA, not just from the DA, but from other parties, because those political parties have failed South Africa. And what kind of people are we if we stay in a political party that is failing South Africa because we serve that political party and not the South African people? I didn't enter South Africa in politics in South Africa so that I could serve a political party. I entered politics to serve the people of this country. And ultimately, we must constantly examine whether the political home that we are operating in as a voter or even as a person involved in politics is doing the best job in serving the people of our country. You mentioned earlier the work about the multi-party charter. We were involved in co-founding that particular charter. And we are the ones living up to the terms of that agreement. That agreement is to provide an alternative to the ANC. We've become increasingly worried about some of our partners that appear to be equivocating on the question of the ANC. And we have been going around this country ensuring the South African people that if a vote for ActionSA will never be used to keep the ANC in power or prolong their tenure, not because we hate the ANC, but because we hate what their leaders have done to South Africa. There's got to be an alternative. And I think the state of our country makes it appalling that the ANC seems to have its choice of potential suitors from the opposition to prolong their tenure in government.
0214460567. You can drop me a WhatsApp, a question to Michael Beaumont of ActionSA in studio with us. We will try and feature as many political parties before the 29th of May. But Michael, what's your thoughts on the Western Cape? Well, the Western Cape appears to be a solidly battleground province. What has changed over the last 5 years, provincially and nationally, that we have not only the Western Cape, you have KZN, you have Gauteng, that in one aspect has been very much entrenched within the ANC, and the Western Cape case, the Democratic Alliance. What has changed within the last 5 years?
Well, I think one of the things that's changed the most in these provinces is that people are getting tired of the arrogance that comes with majority government. If you consider a lot of the challenges we have in South Africa, it's born of governments that feel they can do what they like without any consequences from the voters. That is the most unhealthy form of government, and government must feel like its life is permanently on the line. And I think the fact that these governments are losing their majorities, and I think it's quite important to say, that is a voter perspective. If the majority government of the DA in the Western Cape is being watered down and is going to be lost in this election, that is a vote of a lack of confidence by an increasing number of people. The difference, I suppose, is that we and other members of the multi-party charter are committed to keep the ANC out. We don't think the return of the ANC is a good thing for the people of the Western Cape. And perhaps what the DA needs in the Western Cape is some coalition partners to humble them and to ensure that the agenda doesn't have the blind spots that we certainly see in many parts of the Western Cape, because the loss of that majority is a direct reflection on the fact that some people don't experience the good governance that is campaigned about by the DA.
We've experienced coalition government in for the last two local election cycles. I don't think we've managed to figure out the nuts and bolts on that. When we're talking about provincial government, talk about national government, are we even ready for that if we haven't even dealt with coalition government in how it truly benefits residents of metros and municipalities on a local level, Michael?
There's no doubt that the experience around coalition has been problematic. And I think we must understand that coalition is new. It's new to people in politics. It's also new to voters and members of the media. And we're all trying to find our way around coalition politics. But I certainly think we've gone through a storming phase, and we are going through a norming phase. The entire purpose behind the multi-party charter was to say that the fact that you only have 14 days to form a government after elections is a complete anomaly in our country. In most countries where coalitions succeed, you have months. So the multi-party charter was necessary to form a pre-election agreement where we could start to do some of that work beforehand. And some good work has been done, identifying common policy areas, identifying principles around how we can appoint meritorious leaders into positions that serve people in the most effective way. And I think these things are massive improvements that are going to drive us forward and achieve greater stability. But what we want to see after these elections is coalition agreements that are predicated on service delivery. The coalition agreements we've had up until now are vague, general, and non-specific. We want coalition agreements that are built around what are the projects that are going to move a province forward so that we can focus on the service delivery and not the positions.
Should the public be privy to those coalition agreements?
Absolutely. So aside from them being made public, which I think is actually a bare minimum, we are in favor of those negotiations happening openly. Because we think that, you have a process like an election where millions of people participate, and then you have the proverbial smoke-filled room where decisions are made by a bunch of people, often unelected people. And we need to think very carefully about the mechanisms of transparency when we form these arrangements. I also think that one of the best disinfectants in politics is always sunlight. And if you want political parties to behave well, make sure the cameras are pointing at them.
Let's go to traffic, and then we'll bring you some voice notes, some questions, some comments directed at Michael Beaumont of ActionSA.
Good morning, Lester. I'm going to say something that's a bit controversial, but I think it's actually very true. I think a lot of people are undecided in our country. The majority of people are undecided in our country because they simply haven't put in the effort to investigate other parties. They haven't put in the effort. They're still on the idea that there's really only three parties: ANC, DA, EFF. And okay, they obviously know about the good party, and they know COPE and all the other parties with the pedigree, but they don't actually know what the difference is. They just know that they run by someone different. And the majority of people are not putting in the effort to learn about what those other parties' policies are and the ideologies, and reading their manifestos. That's my feeling, and been my experience when I've asked people in my circle of friends and family who they're voting for.
Appreciate the message. The messenger, Michael, asks, without mentioning the word corruption, name three of South Africa's major issues and what you'd be able to do to fix them.
Extend the interview a bit, Lester, but there's no question it starts with growing our economy and creating jobs. If you do not get that right, everything else is not going to fall into place. So certainly that is a priority, and you've got to have clear policy direction, and you've got to have good government policy so that the private sector has the environment to create the jobs that is needed. Certainly the fight against crime. I won't mention corruption, fine, but the fight against crime has to be won. You've got to have an ethical leadership of our law enforcement. There's got to be complete reform. We need to put more boots on the ground. We need to have quicker justice by better trained and capacitated prosecutors. And we need to ensure that there's a tougher criminal justice system. In ActionSA, we say that we want to reform minimum sentencing so that life means life. People can't get out to hurt law-abiding South Africans, and the conversation is too much about the rights of criminals. And I think certainly we've got to talk about the issue of education. In South Africa, education has been one of the greatest casualties of the last 30 years. And there are too many young people who leave school without the pathway to something else. And it is that hopelessness that is generating huge social problems in South Africa. We need more colleges. We need more artisanal schools. We need more universities. We need a school system that isn't run by the unions. We need a school system that's run by government and not unelected unions who, fight back against school inspectors and performance management that has to be in place.
Many parties are touting themselves as rule of law parties. Many parties are advocating more police, but we've already one of the highest police to population ratios in South Africa. We have prisons that are heaving with people who have been sentenced and are serving sentences. I'm seeing very, very few political parties speak to the social causes of crime, social causes of petty crime, which leads to convictions, which leads to people being in prison. And while in prison, they essentially get institutionalized in the college of crime, the university of crime, that is the South African Correctional Services system. So what we're talking about in terms of the root causes of social crime?
Well, I think let's say that the college of crime, I think, is some of the political parties you're talking about, actually. They seem to be the ones which are teaching the finest forms of crime, I'm afraid. But, to deal with the question seriously, there is no question that more needs to be done. I think the notion that there is lots of police is not entirely correct if you look at our ratios of police to people in our country. And I think there's a number of features about the South African Police Service's top-heavy, top-brass system that ensures too many of those policemen and women are not on the ground serving South Africans. They are in offices serving a bloated structure, or they are undercapacitated without the vehicles and the systems they need to serve the South African people in the most effective way. And I think that has to be a major feature of change. There's no question that, when I said it starts with the economy and it starts with more young people having pathways after school, I'm talking about the root causes of crime. There's no question that young people who have those pathways are less likely to enter, criminal behavior, etc. But from our point of view, we adopt a pretty hard position when it comes to correctional services, because we actually think the priority of our correctional services needs to be prisons. It's got to be taking violent offenders off our street and locking them up for life and keeping them away from law-abiding citizens, but also differentiating from those forms of crime which are rehabilitatable, that do need correction, do need people to be able to re-enter society and become law-abiding citizens. But we must be clear, those who rape, those who murder, those who commit armed robbery, those are people who we need to lock up and throw away the key so that South Africans can't be continuously harmed by people who should never have been free in the first place.
A question to your guest. The Western Cape is a mess where it comes to the environment. What is ActionSA's environmental policy, particularly relevant to this region?
Well, we have good legislation around the environment in this country, but it's not being implemented. In fact, I was sharing with you off mic just now that the Western Cape has become, even a greater polluter than eThekwini municipality when it comes to sewage. I was on the beaches this morning that have been shut down because of the sewage spills, and currently you have 30 million litres of raw sewage that is going out through the marine outfalls in the False Bay and Atlantic seaboard area, and going straight into a protected marine reserve where endangered species like the African penguin lives. And the hormones and chemicals in the sewage are fundamentally affecting that reserve and the biodiversity there. Cape Town has been a serial offender in this regard. They've been in denial a long time. But I'm very glad to see the pressure that we have applied and the criminal charges that we have laid against the city there is starting to move the needle. And there's now a conversation about the need for treatment of the sewage before it is put out like that. And serious reforms are necessary.
The sewage outflows into marine areas, that is governed by national legislation in terms of Cape Town's ability to, at 3 sites, put out outflows, has been licensed by the National Department of the Environment. The City of Cape Town says it is well within the framework of the law, Michael.
Well, it isn't. And firstly, because the permits have actually been breached by the City of Cape Town regularly. We have gone through a Promotion of Access to Information Act process in which we have determined that over a 6-month period there were 104 days where the City of Cape Town exceeded the maximum amount of output, where there was a regular breaching of the quality of the sewage that was being put out and the breaches of a number of chemical standards that are associated with that. And one of the most serious breaches is that the permits require them to report these breaches to national government. And the City of Cape Town confirmed in their response to us that they hadn't complied with that. They didn't have those records. So there's no question that they haven't been complying with legislation in that regard. But we've also got to ask ourselves that we've come a long way since 1895, when these marine outfalls were put in place. Environmental legislation came about in the early 2000s. And our knowledge of the harm of what is being done to these areas has improved since then, and so too should our actions.
In the interest of parity and equality, I cannot give you much more time, as more than we've given other political parties. So this could be a lightning round to you. Question or comment: locking up youth who are desperate for a better life does not solve the crime problem. The elite want the problem locked up. Your thoughts?
Well, not at all. I think there's got to be a discernment between the millions of young people who are keen to contribute to the economy, who want to study further, who want to work, and are being locked out by an economy that is failing. I think it's completely different to violent criminal offenders that we're referring to. And in fact, we have to protect law-abiding citizens from violent offenders, and we'll be unapologetic about that.
Why should I vote for ActionSA when I can just vote for the mother body, the DA, directly?
Certainly not the mother body. ActionSA is quite different from the DA. And I think people must understand that even in a coalition environment, the relative strength of political parties within that coalition matters. And if people are going to make the DA big and make ActionSA small in a coalition, then people must understand that the downsides of that particular arrangement, which includes arrogance in coalition, includes flag burning and other things that people find offensive, is going to become, par for the course. If they would like government that is more progressive, if they would like government that benefits more people and not just an elite set of people living in this province, ActionSA is the political party to vote for. And the stronger we are, the more progressive we can make coalitions in this province.
Progressive, surely not socially progressive, if ActionSA has made particularly remarks, particularly against undocumented migrants to this country?
Well, actually, I think one of the most socially progressive thing you can do, because at the end of the day, uncontrolled immigration is the problem. And that is a problem of government. We place the door at the feet of government, not at immigrants. We think the scapegoating of foreign nationals is highly irresponsible, and we don't do it. But we must understand that a country has borders, and those borders need to be determined on the basis of how goods and people enter and leave them. And the ANC's complete abrogation of their responsibilities in that regard is highly irresponsible, and it affects the poorest of the poor most fundamentally. And we are unapologetic about that. And every successful country in the world operates borders in a rule of law based position, and so should we.
Michael Beaumont, really appreciate your time. Thanks so much.